I got introduced to, I think I was in sixth grade, which would have been 1939, and we formed our Y Club, which is called Franklin. I think the clubs at that time were all named after, you had to pick out some president. And so that was sixth grade, and was formed right across the street from Haven School, where we all went to school, and it went right on through 4 years of high school. And of course, some people came and went, and but we ended up, at the end of high school, there was 13 of us in the Franklin Y Club, and the 13th guy was, his mother had moved out of town, and he lived with my family in his senior year so that he could finish ETHS, and then he went off to Ohio, and we've never been in touch since, but the 12 have remained in touch and good friends all these years. My second involvement was Camp Echo. And I'm not sure when I started to go to Camp Echo, but I was fairly small. I remember going there a number of years, and then the final year, when I was 15, I was a counselor in training, which turned out to be an adventure because, in fact, the counselor that I was going to learn from was drafted into the Army, and so I became the counselor. So at 15, well, the kids that I had were 9, and 9 and 15 get along just fine, and it really worked very well until the parents came for parent weekend, and they wanted to meet their counselor. And when they saw this 15-year-old kid, I think there was screams for, I want my money back or something. They didn't seem too pleased, but the kids and I thought it was a great adventure. And then the third involvement, years later in the 70s, I played in the pit band with Cliff Aspergen for Brilliantine shows. So that was kind of back touching with the Y, and I did that for 3 or 4 years, I think, and watched some of the rising stars come through and do those shows. That was a lot of fun as a musician. Well, in the 40s, this is the Franklin Y Club. There was 13 of us, and we did all kinds of things through those years, but the important thing was that when we got through, we were still close friends, and we've remained that way even to today. We're all in touch with each other, the ones that are still with us, and we still laugh and carry on and exaggerate and lie about all the things that we did when we were in high school as Franklins. I was a member of the Franklin Y Club in high school in the 40s, and now 64 years later, we are still in touch with each other and have stayed that way all through the years. Well, one of the reasons we've stayed together is that we were so busy bragging about ourselves. And there was 20 championships. We had 4 years of school. We had 5 championships a year. And of those 20 championships, the Franklin Club won 14. And we were very cocky and very proud of that record. And that's what we mostly talk about. Well, I think about the memories, and people ask me what do I remember about the friendships, and I think the problem is what you remember you don't want to tell anybody. It's the adventures that we had that we thought were a little over the top but got away with. In retrospect, as a maturing adult, maybe it wasn't so bad, but it seemed like it at the time. No, I discussed this at lunch with the boys, and they told me to keep quiet. I think our common thread at the Y really was athletics, and we swam a lot, we played basketball a lot, and then we played the 5 sports a year together. We organized those teams ourselves. We had no adult interference. We decided who was going to be quarterback, who was going to call the plays, and I think that's what solidified us, because there was this constant need to organize and perform in sports. And then when we had nothing else to do, we went swimming. Which, by the way, historically, of course, we swam in the nude. Because this was the Evanston Y. There were no women at the Y. It was just men. And I'll tell you, Susan, it's not for this, but I swim now at the old folks' home at Presbyterian Homes. And a couple of months ago, a new sign arrived on the door going into the pool and said, "Men must wear bathing suits." And I just howled, and I thought, well, you know, maybe there's some other guy around here that's had the same experience I had, which is when you go swimming, you go swimming. And then I thought, no, it had to be some guy wandered into the pool, right? And without the suit, so they had to put up the sign to make sure that didn't happen again. I did uncover some, our minutes. Somebody dutifully took minutes of all our meetings, which are really probably ought to be published because they're just absolutely the funniest stuff you'll ever read. We had a couple of very creative people that wrote those minutes, and it wasn't much of a record of what we did as much as what we talked about and thought was so hysterical at the time. Oh, I can tell you one story. One of the famous incidences, which was not as a group, but we had one or two guys who were really a little bit over the edge more than the rest of us, and one of them in the old YMCA pool, it's still there, but with the original pool when we were there, had a balcony, and one time on a bet, he jumped off the balcony into the pool. Besides our sports record, I think the other thing that we're particularly proud of, and it wasn't just our club, but the Franklin Club was the nucleus of the kids that went to the Y and said, why can't we have some place to hang out on the weekends? And that eventually became the Plantation Room. But it was our particular group that started that, and then, of course, now I look back and realize there was all sorts of adult effort and adult funding to bring it about, but the Plantation Room was born then in I'm guessing 1944, and I know that our club was in charge of the first night when it was open, and all of Evanston was going to come and see this fabulous place that had been built in the basement of the Y. Well, I'm editorializing, but one of the difficulties of a place where kids can go that call their own is that a particular group or a particular time it's created, and then it doesn't maintain itself because the creators were the ones that gave it the energy and carried it forward, and then as the years go by, there isn't a feeling of possession, and it's just this place, and for some reason it loses flavor. The Plantation Room itself eventually went out of business, and a few years went by, and it was recreated. And the same time we built the Levy Center in Evanston, which would have been whatever, the 60s, and the kids that formed it was just dynamite for a couple of years, but as they went on and new kids came along, with a matter of a couple of years, it didn't function anymore, and never has since. So a place to go is a strange thing. This is not about the Y, but we had a lot of dances. We had dances all the time, and there were no adults involved. One of the peculiarities of our time in high school was influenced by the war. Because of the war, there was a different demand, a different mentality, because people were going off in the service. So there's a great deal of tolerance about kids, the so-called kids, because the next thing you knew, they were going to be in the Army. So we had a lot of freedom. Things were safer. All you had to do at night was show up for dinner at 6 o'clock, and the dances, believe it or not, went from 9 to 1. And there was at least one dance every weekend, and it was not just in the school. It was at the country club and the Michigan Shores, which was then Shawnee. And I'm particularly aware of that because I played in the band. The guys that would normally do that sort of thing were in the service. So at 16, I worked a lot of Friday and Saturday nights in high school playing for various dances. Well, of course, the energy level is just unbelievable. And so, you know, I was probably in my 40s, and absorbing the energy of the Brilliantine kids was just absolutely remarkable. It was a wonderful, wonderful thing. The rehearsals were nothing but fun, just watching what was going on. And Cliff Aspergen was the director for a number of years, and he, you know, had that magic way with both the musicians that he collected and the kids, and directing them and putting the music and the band all together. And of course, getting the band to play quiet enough so you could hear the kids.